to Zach, who's calling in from London in the United Kingdom. Zach, what's going on?
Hi, guys. Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah, for sure. So what's on your mind, Zach?
I just wanted to talk about morality and ask you guys, if you don't believe in a moral authority, how would you ground your morality?
Ooh.
Oh, that is a good question with almost certainly a long answer. We could talk about that all night.
Yeah, when it comes to questions, that kind of surround the atheist community, I think the morality questions are probably some of the most complicated, because I think every atheist you talk to is really going to give you a different answer on how you handle that. And you also, in your question, and I don't know if you did this explicitly, but you made the assumption that our morality doesn't come from an authority, and there's a lot of atheists that do cite these kinds of authorities. They'll cite the golden rule, or they'll cite some other thing that they're drawn to, maybe the Humanist Manifesto and stuff like that are like kind of guiding principles. But while I think about this, I want Erica to go first on this question.
Oh God. I try to hold to the general principle of one kind of vaguely the golden rule, also like a utilitarianism. I just came off a geology talk.
Right.
But yes, utilitarianism, sort of like how can we do the least harm? I think that when we consider a moral authority as far as laws and things like that go, we have to remember that we as humans obey a ton of moral authorities that are not divine in nature, even those who are religious. Like, for instance, it's illegal to run a red light, right? But that's not biblical. That's not in any divine text. But we all do it anyways, because we recognize that it is morally responsible of us to stop when the light is red in case someone is coming into traffic. We don't want to hit anybody. So I think the idea of a moral authority is kind of painted with like a lopsided brush in that aspect. Because we as humans do come up with our own morals, whether we like it or not. We see that just in the variety of cultures that we have.
Oh, and not just that, Erica, you're selling yourself short. You're the primatologist here.
Hey.
Okay, you can tell us that we can observe all kinds of, not just hominids. I mean, obviously, there's no other hominid species we can look at, but we can look at other primates, and we can see some basis of some sort of social agreement or kind of code of ethics that happens within bands of specific groups.
Absolutely.
And they may not be as complex as what we have today in a codified law system, but they definitely have a kind of a social agreements that we often find in our interpersonal relationships today. So it seems that morality came before religion. It seems like religion is kind of the more recent idea, whereas our understandings of what's right and what's wrong seems to predate that a little bit.
Certainly in the concept of like our basic tenets that we see near universally across cultures, right? Like, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't kill. Those are your kind of classic ones that are listed. And we see those in spades as far as what other primates kind of have to abide by in order to stay within their troop. There was a really cool study on vervet monkeys, and it's kind of like your classic prisoner's dilemma, right? The vervet monkeys figured out that when they make these loud screeching sounds, everyone heads for the treetops, right? Because they're like, oh, there's a leopard or something coming to eat us, which gives the crier the opportunity, if there is no leopard, to swoop in and start pulling from the best fruiting bodies that maybe the alphas wouldn't let them get to prior to that. But the rest of the vervet monkeys, if they start to notice that someone's doing too much lying, too much crying wolf, they'll just go beat them up. Like they'll just straight up go beat them up. So we do see the roots of some of our very basal kind of moral imperatives in some of our cousins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, long story short, we may not have a universal system of morals that we could all agree on or all definitely follow, but our sense of morality, our sense of wanting to do what's right, may have evolved as simply a pragmatic scheme to survive, but has also changed into our society today. Like, I would argue that most people in the world right now, like think of morality as more than just the simple, well, this is what I need to do to survive. Like there is a stronger desire in people, and not everybody has that desire. That's why we have people who commit the crimes that they do, or who struggle with the mental illnesses that they have. And we also have to recognize that people with those mental illnesses, people with psychopathy, or, you know, these other kinds of things, like they are the exception to the rule. Like most of us have those instincts. We have those kind of guiding principles internally. So that was a lot, Zach. We just spit a lot of things at you. What do you think about that?
No, I think a lot of the things you say make sense, but it's like when you come across a moral dilemma, like, for example, let's take rape, right? You have a situation where you have pain and pleasure in one scenario. And a lot of people that look at morality subjectively will have to come to the conclusion of which one takes precedence. Because when I hear people talk about pleasure and pain, they usually side with the pain and say it's wrong, right? But then why is the pain taken precedence over the pleasure?
Ooh, I've got a decent answer for this, I think. So suffering as a whole is considered suffering sort of in an objective sense, in that in some way it's probably reducing your fitness. And this is strictly from like a biological sense, right? If you're suffering, if you're in pain, the odds across the board that you're going to be able to do what you need to do to make it to the next day are probably lower, at least in that immediate moment, even if it's as simple as stubbing your toe, which distracts you, and maybe a lion comes and snags you. So I would say from a survival standpoint, the sort of the institution of suffering supersedes, like preventing suffering supersedes the acquisition of pleasure, because pleasure is not a survival imperative. So if you're, you know, like for this very reason, if two monkeys are, for instance, mating and a leopard comes along, well, they're not going to put that pleasure above their potential suffering. They're going to break up and run. So that's what I would say from sort of a bio angle. Your fitness is at risk.
You know, I think what you want to hit at here, Zach, and maybe I'm wrong, is that, like, you know, we come across these moral dilemmas and we have to figure out, okay, because our kind of sense of morality doesn't come from this divine ultimate source, how do we handle like the day with this kind of stuff? And it's difficult to kind of suss out exactly what we should or shouldn't do. Ultimately, you know, I don't think it's Erica and I's belief that there's anybody that's going to punish us in an ultimate sense of what we do. So we're left to our own devices. We're left to decide, should we follow the state? Should we revolt against the state? Is the state just? Should we follow laws that we think are unjust? You know, these are really complicated questions that I think only you can answer. And I know that sounds like a lame cop-out, but it's like, as soon as I start to get into the nitty gritty, I mean, like I can describe what I feel about certain situations and what I think sounds right to me based on the principle of just minimizing harm. But like, that's going to come into conflict, and it's not a catch-all for every single situation. So does that mean I believe in a situational ethics? Maybe. But it's definitely really complicated. And I'm sorry if it's not a super satisfying answer, but I mean, this isn't something that's new. Yeah. This is something that has plagued humanity since we really started thinking about this stuff. And I don't personally think that we will ever come to a one-size-fits-all morality that's going to fit for everything. I just don't see it. I don't see how we could. But maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe future philosophers will just have it all figured out.
Be nice. I think too, just as a quick add-on, lastly, it depends on who your in-group is, right? Like, you want to protect your in-group, and the idea of humanism is that everybody is in the in-group. So we want to protect humans rather than just my family or just my country or just my whatever. Expand your in-group, and I think then what we realize is that the reduction of suffering for all of humanity is kind of our net goal.
But should we include sentient creatures in our in-groups? Should we consider them as persons? I don't know. These things, it's always more complicated. It's always more complicated. And I get annoyed when other atheists are like, yeah, this morality thing, we got to figure it out. It's like, no, we definitely don't. Like, there's lots of stuff that we still got to figure out one day at a time. But as long as we can all agree, we're not going to get our source from one divine book. It's just doesn't seem like it hasn't really worked out so far, and I don't see it working out in the future. So maybe some other solutions is probably the best, right? I don't know. What do you think, Zach?
No, I think it's true. I mean, like I hear a lot of people say minimizing pain and maximizing pleasure. So I always thought that they meant that on the same level. So it's a bit confusing, because if you put them both on the same level, and you have a situation where you have both, and you have a situation where you have both present, why would we pick one over the other?
Yeah, I think it has to. I think ultimately, unfortunately, you have to make the decision that the suffering of a member of your in-group or of yourself, preventing that is more important than your immediate pleasure. I think that's a decision that most cultures have kind of come to just almost instinctively rather. And that's probably just due to the fact that we're very social animals. I mean, like if you and your buddy are on your way to this sick plum tree at the top of the hill and you're like, yeah, these plums are the best plums ever.
Oh, so sick. Love these sick plums right here. It's great.
Yeah, dude, the best plums. And then leg, and he's like, oh, I need to get to a hospital right now. Even if they're the best plums in the world, your instinct, weirdly enough, at least this is for most people that aren't kind of pathologic in nature, but the instinct for the vast majority of people is going to be, well, we're gonna have to get those sick plums another time. And I think that it sounds very silly, but it does seem, at least on some level, a bit instinctual that we want to protect our own, and the goal is making that circle as big as possible.
Yeah, but one thing too, Erica, I think is worth pointing out is that as human beings, and we see this in other primates too, it's like we're able to make the short-term losses for the long-term gain. Like we're able to make that calculation in our mind, and that's an evolutionary adaptation that other animals don't necessarily have. And just that kind of thinking, that's a huge part of how we understand ethics. Like, I know like this vaccine prick is going to hurt you, kid, but like that it's worth the pain if it can protect you from this illness that could just do irreparable harm to you. You know, like that's a small example, but also like, look, I know that I really want this sandwich right now, but I got to save my money for something else or you know, or whatever kind of things. Like that's also intrinsic to how we kind of make these moral decisions, and I don't think it's something that could be overlooked. So like if we can make those kinds of judgments, and I think that's part of it too, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I had to ask. I mean, thank you for taking the time to take my call.
Well, cool, Zach. Yeah, I hope we were able to answer your questions, and yeah, it's always really interesting to think about this kind of stuff. So thanks again for calling in, and have a good rest of your night over there in the UK. I know it's pretty late. My UK guests always complain because they'd have to do it in like 1 o'clock in the morning, but they do it anyway, and I appreciate them nonetheless. So yeah, morality, it's complicated. That's what I gotta say.
I know that's always a tough question, and it's a very good one it's very stimulating. As if you want to put it that way.
It is, especially like it's the one where there's just so many terms and so many schools of thought. Yeah. And just like you could study, I mean, your whole life this stuff and not know everything there is to know about it. I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some PhD will tell me, yeah, you can learn all this, but I don't think so. It seems tough. Seems pretty tough, but
we can do our best.
We do our best, and you're right. As humanists, that's our goal is to protect the in-group. That's what we feel is best, and that's how we want to do things. Now, does that mean that our feelings are ultimately what we should base our morality on? I don't know. That's not something I'm willing to explore because we have some other callers, and maybe that'll be for another time. But